And of course, we know how important this issue is for a lot of parents, and many of you still have a lot of questions. So joining us this morning, CCSD Superintendent Dr. Jesus Jara, joining us to discuss more on the district's plan for next school year. So thank you so much for waking up early and joining us here on Good Morning Las Vegas. We really appreciate it.
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So ahead of today's meeting, one of the biggest questions I'm seeing from parents and teachers alike seems to surround the proposal for staggered learning and then distance learning. So like we mentioned before, 2 days a week inside the classroom, other days distance learning. So maybe you can clarify, how will this work exactly? And also, how many students is the district learning or looking to put inside each classroom for the in-person learning? And also curious to know, if for some reason distance learning is working for some parents at home, do they have the option to keep their kids at home for the 5 days a week?
Yeah, no, thank you. All great questions and all concerns. When we really look at this plan, the first things we're taking a look at is obviously the health and wellness of our employees and our students, right? That is first our priority. And the only way that we can really look to see about getting our students in our classrooms, it was to be on a rotating basis, on a cohort basis. And right now, what we're looking at is no more than 18 students in a class. Our square footage is, average about 900 square feet in our schools, in our classrooms. So when you look at social distancing and the guidelines that have been put in place under phase 2 by the governor's office, it's really no more than 18 kids. So that gives us, an opportunity to at least bring a cohort of students, as we are planning to do. The other students will then go virtual. How are we going to do that? As soon as this plan is approved, we're going to put a survey. Our schools will put a survey out for families, because we also have in our cohort, in our plan, we also have where students can stay and doing distance education as a choice by parents and not come to school. So that's going to be, the determination. I mean, it's not ideal. As a superintendent and a father and a former teacher and principal, the first thing I want all my kids, I want all students to be in our schools, and unfortunately, we're facing this health crisis that we have to follow the guidelines, and we and this board, as constitutional officers, they can't go and not obey the governor's decisions and the governor's guidelines. So this plan is not ideal. It's not what I want. It's not what the board wants, but it's the only way that we can get our kids in our school learning in front of students at least 2 days a week.
All right, so that leads me to the next question. So we've heard from a lot of parents and teachers that distance learning worked well for some, but it really felt short for others. And a lot of them are saying that the lack of resources and also poor planning is some of the reasons behind that. So how is the district right now going to fix some of those issues? And also curious, where do you guys stand when it comes to Chromebooks and Wi-Fi for some of those students that may not have access to that stuff?
You know what, I tell you, I sympathize. And one of the things that we have seen and I have seen, and the learning loss to me is also something that needs to be addressed. And I'm going to tell you, our kids didn't learn across the board. And one of the biggest concerns that I have is how many, our students were not able to keep up because of the lack of resources. And I'll tell you, I think the lack of resources or the lack of planning, I would say, I want to rectify and clarify that. Nobody across the world was ready and planning for a pandemic. So it's not just a CCSD issue. This comes to the reality of lack of funding for K-12 education here in Nevada. The not having the Chromebooks, not having the technology, that is not something that we had the ability to fund. When my principals are deciding to keep a teacher to lower class size to 40, high 30, which is the largest class size in America, to then compare to buy devices, it's something that there's not enough funding. So as far as the Chromebooks, what you see in our plan is that we're going to use federal dollars from the CARE Act, from the stimulus money from the federal government, to buy the 70,000 devices that are needed in this community for our children. We still have the gap on the Wi-Fi connectivity in our families. That's also, when you really look at, internet is not a luxury anymore. That is a necessity to operate. And these are things that, this entire community needs to help us achieve, because this is not a school issue, responsibility. So I'm looking forward to having more discussion this evening to see what other possibilities. But I'm so proud of the work this team has done to be able to put something together where it meets the needs of at least some face-to-face. Our teachers want to put their eyes on our kids. So those are some of the things that we're bringing forward for discussion. And as you said, the final vote is on July 9th.
All right, unfortunately, we ran out of time, and I had several other questions to ask you about CCSD defunding the police department on campus, also counseling for students. Curious about that, but we'll have to continue this at another time. Thank you so much for spending your morning with us here on Good Morning Las Vegas. Hopefully, we'll get to check in with you again soon.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.